Welcome to Rockstar Doctor Life. I'm Alyssa Longo, and each episode, my guests and I will bring you fresh, fun ways to rock your life as a health professional and create a business that aligns with who you are and the life you want to live. Hey everyone, I am super excited as usual to chat with another rockstar doctor. This time it's a fellow whose our worlds just kept colliding, and we kept running into each other in professional groups and some training programs that we both did together, and then in person the first time almost a year ago at a chiropractic event, a business event that he was speaking at. And I have to tell you, he was by far one of the most dynamic, engaging, hard-hitting truths, impactful speakers that I heard there, and now I have the honor of coaching along with him in a program with Doctorate Osborne. So welcome to the show, Dr. Jason Richardson.
Well, thanks for having me. That was a great intro. I want to just sit. I could just sit and hear you re-intro me. Thank you.
You're an impressive guy.
I appreciate that as well.
I'm looking at your bio, and obviously I've gotten to know you a little bit lately. For the people who don't know who you are, I'd love it if you can just start with, who's Dr. Jason Richardson? What are you doing right now? And I'm sure in our conversation, we are going to, go through some more of your history and how you got here. But what are you doing these days?
Okay. So here's what we'll do. I will say what I'm doing, and we can let the listeners decide who I am. That's how trusting I am right now.
Can you tell folks that he's a psychologist? He's already playing these games with us here.
No, it's no games. That's just where I'm at. So I am a licensed psychologist, clinical psychologist by trade. But I've had the benefit of being a professional athlete for 15 years, from 1993 to 2008. And during my tenure as an athlete, I always went to school. I was the one who went to school. And along the way, I got an MBA and decided not to use that entirely. But I wanted to work with athletes. I had the benefit of working with a great sports psychologist here in San Diego, Dr. Jeff Warren, and it ended up becoming a mentor of mine. And then, I just kind of was looking at it from a business perspective, actually, because on one of my flights back from a race toward the end of my career, I happened to sit next to a couple, and they were psychologists. And it just seemed like the perfect thing. There wasn't any inventory. I could market myself as I did for racing and sponsorship, put myself out there, and it enabled me to speak or write. I liked the cachet of being Dr. J. Rich, or at least I thought I did. And so that's what I did. I came home from that race and told my family I was going back to school for a third time, and got through as fast as I could, because I was no spring chicken. By the time I went back to school, and retrained myself to be a psychologist, and I happened to be okay at it, happened to be good at it. And then the whole point was to pursue speaking and really change the game. Because I knew, once I'd gotten into school, I knew that there was no other, psychologists weren't looking at it from the same angle I was necessarily, whether it was sports psychologists or clinical. And I had all this really good stuff from sports and marketing and a different vantage point. So I went through the whole process pretty quickly. Wrote a book called It's All BS. The BS stands for belief systems, with Dr. Rob Irwin. And and from there we created not a speaking thing. It was actually a training based on that. And we had a contract with a hospital, and we did that for 3 years. So every Wednesday I was literally on stage for 4 hours. And it was to the point where I couldn't even really prepare, because the groups that were coming in through the hospital and through their network were pretty large, and we didn't know what they were going to bring. And there was just only so much we could prepare for, 52 weeks or whatever it was. So I actually got a lot of reps speaking in front of people. And then that turned into more speaking. And then,
and a podcast. You had a podcast at one point.
Yeah, I had a podcast. I'm currently in the process of rebranding that and building a list of new guests and shows for that. So I'm actually kind of torn between names of the podcast. It's either going to be called Here's the Thing, or it's going to be called Championship Life. And I'm thinking of leaning towards Championship Life, because that's more consistent with all of my branding. And that's the original name I wanted for a Gold Medal Mindset podcast, which is still available on iTunes. Anyways,
great name.
Long story bearable. what I'm doing now is I'm doing a ton more speaking. I do clinical work probably about 2.5 days of the week. And I work because we're in Olympic season now, meaning people are starting to earn points for Olympic qualification. There's some clients. I have some high level athletes on board and doing the executive coaching and coaching other professionals. And I just launched probably, what was it? No, December, a product or service, I should say, that helps other healthcare professionals put on their cape and either go out and speak or find other ways to bring in a buck outside of their four walls. So because I found a pretty good way of putting myself out there and helping other docs put themselves out there that's consistent with why they got into the thing anyway. But yeah, it just allows them a little bit more freedom to spread their wings outside of the license and, get back to literally who they are, which brings us to who I am. And I was thinking about this on the airplane because I went on my wife's ski trip, her company's annual ski trip. And I'm probably my most true self. Like I'm literally most free when I'm on stage or working with a client or doing this when I'm able to kind of speak my piece. I'm probably my most me I could actually be. That's powerful. And I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. I think like if I can help someone else or a group of people or a company be their most who they are, dude, that's like putting a lot of power and energy into the world.
Well, I would think that that's what the role of a psychologist would be, right? To help people figure out who they are and how they can thrive in the world if they're dealing with specific challenges with their mental health, right? Or with if they want to improve their athletic performance. So, for you, your journey has kind of evolved, it sounds, from the racing days to going back to school to getting involved and then speaking. Like it's just been, what would you say has been the key to that succession for you? Like, were you just really open to it? Were you just really lucky? Did you just shift when your interests changed or what? Because people go through career changes all the time, right? And they sometimes are maybe not sure about their next steps. And how did it work for you and what would you recommend for others?
Well, I think for me, it's funny because I always had this, so little more background. So my dad, very entrepreneurial, my stepfather even. So I had seen people build companies. I'd seen people lead other people. I'd seen people do, and also be a member of the community, right? Like not just like, oh, I'm going to go out and make a bunch of money, but like really bring people together and help them in some way, shape or form. So that piece has always been a part of my life. And so even as a psychologist, I remember being in class or even as an intern getting my pre-doc hours, like doing like math going, okay, like at this rate, like how much am I going to charge when I'm in business for myself and And it was always a ceiling. There was always a ceiling. And the business side of me, the marketing side of me, the professional athlete side of me was like, it's cool.
Yeah.
It's good, but I don't know if that is going to be enough for me personally. And then, because I like stuff and I like to do stuff and I like experience and I like freedom and I like flex. And I knew I always wanted to speak. I knew I wanted to write. I didn't know how that was going to come together. And at the same time, it was like, get licensed. But then a gentleman in one of our coaching groups, he was looking at it and he was a business guy and he was looking at it and damn it, there's always like someone who says something and it like resonates with you. But for me, I have this pattern in my life where people will say something and it resonates, but I kind of like don't want to admit that it resonated. And so he says, wow, cause he was talking, and this is when I was working with Rob a lot. And this is when I was in talks of creating our own practice, right? Opening up my own office and blah, 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 which I did. We can get to that if you want to, but he says, wow, it seems like what did he say? He goes, seems like a high output, low yield venture. And I just was like, it got me. And I was like, oh, you're right. Now, I do teach that the payoff is not necessarily just in dollars. Okay. I recognize that there are many payoffs emotionally, psychologically, from a health standpoint, and monetarily. However, as a guy who, I don't know, sees myself as paying for my kids' college, should they go, as a person who sees myself wanting to go on a trip here or there, or, go to the mountain bike park in Whistler, rather than just, SoCal, I figured, I think I want a high yield business situation for myself.
You got clear on the lifestyle that you want to live,
right. Not judging, but that's just, that stuff costs. And by the way, like, health insurance is a good thing. These types of things, right? If someone in my family needs something or wants something that, we're able to help other people out. We're able to help the grandparents out. We're able to help, the cousins or the nieces or whatever. So that's because of that upbringing I had with my dad, because I saw him do the same things. So yeah, it was a high output, low yield, and that just stuck with me. So it was not very hard to make those pivots and changes and just like go for it and try something, because the benefit of the licensed professional, right? And this is something that I help my therapist clients. It's like, look, you are a licensed professional. I don't even know how good you are, really. But the benefit of being a licensed professional is, for the most part, you're guaranteed a base level of income in some way, shape, or form. Like, even if it's like the worst situation, like community mental health, and you might get paid actually a little bit better just because it's, government overpays for everything. But still, if it's like community mental health where your working conditions are not that great and there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of bureaucracy, like, you're still guaranteed this base level, right? So if you're in private practice or some different form of that, whether you're working for yourself or someone else, there's still like this base level of pay. Plus there's some level of flexibility. So why not, since you kind of already have bird in hand, like, why not play bigger in this other arena? Why not, leverage the fact that you are this licensed professional and take all of that schooling and learning and whatever and
but not everyone wants to play bigger, right?
That's fine, but put a spit shine on it and do something else. But this is what I'm thinking in my head, right? Because you asked how I made those choices. I'm thinking, well, wait, like, I can kind of, even like, as a psychologist, I mean, chiropractors, even, it's physical work, right? But like, as a psychologist, as long as I can have a conversation with somebody, I can work.
Right.
Like, literally. So until I'm not, whatever, until I go to the grave. So this is what you want from a, when you look at a SWOT analysis, which is a very 90s business school thing, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Like, that is a huge strength for me to start another venture, is that I have somewhat, knock on my knee, somewhat of a retirement-proof deal where it's like, I can work forever. So that's what made it easy for me, and what makes it easy for me to pivot. That, and the fact that as a professional bike racer, BMX racer, I was already doing exceedingly well in a sport that is very difficult to do well in and make a living in it. So there's a piece of gambling, and I guess I should say gambling. There's always a piece of risk that I think I was more naturally comfortable with than the average person. And naturally, I'm in a business, and a lot of my clients, they're in the business of risk or risk management, or, whether it's financial, or there are other athletes where there's a high level, there's a high payout, but there's also higher risk. And it's my job to help them get over that hump.
So it sounds like, for me, I mean, the influences on who you are have been your family. You talked about your father being an entrepreneur, your stepfather, that athleticism in you, pushing you to drive and to succeed, right? And the curiosity, and really getting clear on what lifestyle you wanted for yourself, and then going to achieve that, as opposed to a lot of people do the reverse. They just think that they should be successful. They will be successful when it'll make them feel good. And they just start chasing things without really getting clear on why they're doing it. Right? So you've had a lot of these influences on your life. What do you tell other people right now, like when you're coaching or when you're trying to help them get clear on the kind of life that they want for themselves? Like, how do you help them find out what kind of life they're going to create for themselves? Like, how they're going to define success or fulfillment, or is there a simple-ish, tactic that you can drop on our listeners?
Because psychologists speak in such simplistic ways, right? Well, what I found is a lot of people, their view of success is not their own.
Right. I've been there for sure.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
me too. Me too. Their view of success is not their own. And then I have this thing where it's like, well, not where it's like, where it's, I've been in Southern California too long. I say like a lot. So my apologies. Where I say defining your wins. And so once we can get to the thing that you're at, what you view as successful,
Mm-hmm.
and then getting past your ego to accept that, because there is a lot of that involved. Well, it's like, well, maybe you might not want a Beamer and $1 million house, and that's fine. Like
you might want more time with your family, right?
You might want more
may
time.
be your current,
and by the way, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a trade-off. It just means that's not your jam. And by the way, I know millionaires who they won't buy Beamers, just like because the Accord or the Prius is just a better purchase.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't care. They don't value cars like that. They value the trips, or they value the time, or they value the flexibility, or they just, or they just value their money, and they just think buying expensive cars is stupid. Mm-hmm. Not judging. I'm just saying, but that's kind of getting at defining the win, defining what's successful to you. And also too is giving yourself the latitude, the permission to change that bar, to reset it. Because the thing is, at 25, my metric or metrics for success were a lot different than they are now, than they were at 35. And I'll be 45 in August. So they look a lot different. And that's okay, because I think with humans, this is not me, but you met Dr. Lee. He went to Laguna or Newport. Mm-hmm. But he talks about, he says you don't need a pill, you need a purpose. And I love that, because he's an MD.
I love that too. Yeah.
And he also says that, if we're not progressing, right? Progression is very closely related to our happiness. Mm-hmm. And so, and we've all been back to the hometown, and we've seen the person who hasn't necessarily grown up. Like they might have peaked at high school, or they might have peaked at whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that, one doesn't look back on their life and have a favorite part. I get that. My head's not in the clouds on this stuff.
I hope my favorite part hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, but there's that peak too, right? Like,
yeah,
you can have many peaks in your life, and that's okay. But I think because we view life as like, okay, this part is done, right? And now, right? So for instance, college is over. Now it's time to what? Settle in and get a job. And that's fine. If that's what you really want, if that makes your heart sing. But something about settling in and staying out of trouble just seems like a little, and that literally, and those are not my words, but I hear those words a lot. I went to the last wedding I went to, guy works for an amazing company. I was like, oh yeah. And we all went to the same, and it just worked out that we all went to the same college. So it was kind of interesting. Different years. Mm-hmm. But that's what he said. I was like, hey, yeah, so you work at, you work at this company. It's huge in Carlsbad, and they do a lot of it. He's like, yeah, well, just staying out of trouble, paying the bills. I'm like,
boring.
Well, I'm like, hey, but my thing is, if you're having fun and it's bringing you joy, sweet. I love you for that. Yeah. But I wasn't getting that vibe.
I don't think that's a vibe.
Yeah. And I was thinking to myself, are you having fun? Like, are you happy? What do you, again, my head's not in the clouds. I understand there's bills. I understand there's responsibilities. Life happens, right? Dogs get run over. I get that. But my point is, where did that metric come from, my friend? Like, is this all you want? And if it is, great. You don't need me. Like, no. we could, it's cool. Like, we can toast. But if you're kind of just getting by and waiting for the next day to come so you can do the same thing, so you can, stay out of more trouble, and then wait for someone else to give you permission for a vacation. Ugh.
What comes to mind for me with that is the idea of boredom, right? And I don't think boredom is effective at any point in our life, in any part of our life. I think when life gets a little stagnant, when people start getting a little bit complacent. And this again is my personal opinion and my life experience. I know the times in my life when I got a little bored, then things aren't growing, right? Things aren't thriving. I'm not evolving. And so I think whether it's, and to be honest, that first thought came to me, my kids were little, and when the kids, you got boys too, and they're really, really quiet. And I'm thinking something's going on here. It's too quiet for two boys to, to not be in trouble. And sure enough, they got bored and they did something they shouldn't have been doing. So it got to be, for me, this metaphor that I use in my house all the time, like, boredom leads to bad behavior. So it's really important to me, and something that I'm always teaching, is stay engaged in life. Let your business keep evolving with you. Let your online, whether it's your online business or your private practice or your personal hobbies or your relationship, like keep evolving and trying new things. And I think that's why I can say, like, I'm happy with all these different ages I go through. I think I keep talking about my life getting better as time goes on, because just different things happen, and they're not better or they're not worse. They're just different. My boys are getting older. I miss the little cuddly stages. I miss reading stories to them, but at the same time, they're becoming really cool people that I have a whole different relationship with now. So it's really just trying to embrace where things are at. And that must be something that you see with your clients, right? People dealing with accepting, I'm guessing, different challenging situations in their life, people dealing with a mental unwell or grief, loss, all kinds of things. Do you have anything applicable, that you would share, like something that maybe that you share consistently, or that you find that you would share consistently that might help our listeners if they're dealing with something like that?
Like grief?
Well, I mean, if you were to summarize with the kind of work that you do, if there was one consistent challenge that your patients have, maybe this is not an easy question for you. But is there something consistent that you observe in their behavioral patterns, in their thought process? Is there a consistent piece of advice that you find yourself giving repetitively? Or are your clients too diverse?
No. I think with many people, and I'm gonna put clinical clients aside, because I mental illness, like actual clinical depression or bipolar, and I'm not working with that as many, because these other portions of my business ventures are taking up more of that time and space. But I'm going to put that aside, because it's like telling someone who's born without an arm to just grow another arm. Like that's just not how it works, right?
Right.
There's a whole different matrix of ways.
Right. So we'll limit it to the people that you're coaching more.
But more, for people who are working and dare I say higher functioning or less debilitated. I think, and this actually came from another podcast I was on, and someone asked me for this advice, and what comes to me, right? Even if you heard my intro, I said I wanted to get the degree, because then I could write and I could coach and I could whatever, right? But that, like, really, I had to wait to do that, right? If I had, right? But the advice is start yesterday.
Okay.
Start yesterday, because in truth, as an athlete, I didn't know all the things I know now, but I was an athlete that was traveling the world, getting paid to do it. I'm pretty sure there's something I could have said that would be helpful to somebody, right? Like, somewhere along the way, right? Whether it was other athletes.
It's a confidence piece for people, or
well, I don't even know if it's sometimes it's confidence, but sometimes it's just your mindset. Like you go through these stages and you get so immersed in how you think things are supposed to be because of this trajectory we create in our brain, that you actually forget that you can change rules. you literally can. I mean, I remember the internet was like beginning to be a big thing, and websites. Like, I was a very outspoken professional athlete guy, but I'd never had a website. How stupid of me, right? Like, I mean, my first Facebook account oh my gosh, like, I got rid of it. But when I was actively racing, there was I probably had 2,000 more people on it. Just, you know what I mean? But not knowing. So starting yesterday, but using that influence, forget my influence, right? Using what experience I had, right? Bringing Jason Richardson to the table even then to do the things that I always wanted to do, I didn't do. Right? I'm not saying I'm living in regret. I'm just saying, from an investment standpoint, when we teach kids, when we teach financial fitness and, putting money away and compounding interest and all that other stuff, your money grows over time. And the sooner you start, the bigger it grows, and the less effort you need to do over time. It's the same thing with any other thing, right? Had I invested into this thing, especially something that I knew I wanted to do, or at least started, those would have been investments, right? So then it would be, how big would my email list be? How advanced would my website be? Would we even be having this conversation? Right? You might have to go through like 2 or 3 people to get to me.
Right.
But start yesterday is the advice, right? Not living in regret, but just thinking, wow, like, because I see a lot of people waiting to start, and I don't care what it is, and they're waiting to start. I'm not telling people to go quit their jobs willy-nilly and just start something new, but hey, that's, but I'm saying
what you're saying is that everyone has something to offer.
Yeah,
And
start. And you have
people is they think they don't have enough, or they don't know all the how, right?
Yeah,
they don't know all
you have enough in you right now to get everything you want in life. You already have enough. And by the way, if you don't have it, you have the ability to get it.
It's true.
It's
true. Right?
It's true. I mean, and that's not me as psychologist guy saying it. That's just like a dude who's been on the earth for a little bit of time.
Yeah, but it's like, I don't want to say like easy for you to say that, but and even some ways for me, because we're doers, right? We make things happen, and it's because we're motivated and we're inspired to do that. But some people don't have that same, maybe they haven't had the right opportunities in their life, or maybe they haven't had people who've supported them, and they don't have the same level of confidence, or they just have a lot of fear. So then what would be your, like, how do we motivate and inspire those people to just start to shine their own light?
Yeah. So here's the thing. You may not want the stuff you actually think you want. Right. It goes back to is your standard of success even yours? And I always tell this story of my cousin who actually told me to reach out to the NFL, and I listened to him, and I did, and it turned out really well, as you found out earlier today. But he is, I don't know what he does actually, but he's like some kind of warehouse manager guy for a relatively somewhat large company. I remember him talking about how they always, every couple of years they give him the opportunity to kind of move upstairs, and he's like, nope. and I love him for that, not because he's very happy, and when I say happy, I mean like solid within who he is, characters and values wise, to be where he is at his job, which he enjoys enough, and it provides him a lifestyle that he likes and loves. Like, he gets to play his golf, he gets to see, he for him, he's there, and he can grow in other ways outside of work or how he makes money. And he's involved in this, and he's involved in, I don't know what kind, one of those secret society type clubs. I don't know which one where they wear funny hats, but he gets a lot out of that. I mean, that's his thing, is being in that organization and doing work in that organization and moving up in that organization. You know what I mean? So it's, but I love that story because he's so settled in who he is and what he wants that it's, most people would go, why wouldn't you take the job upstairs? It's like, I don't want the job upstairs.
Yeah, but it's that clarity. I mean, it's the reason I invited you to be on the show, is like, I know that you're living not just a great life professionally, you're achieving things in your career that make you happy, but you're also really confident and happy with who you are showing up with as a dad, right? And as a partner, with your wife. And, to me, that's the Rockstar Doctor life is not defined by anyone else's success but your own. And it's, what I do the most of is helping other docs figure out who are you, first of all? What's your why? Like, what is your purpose? Like you said, your friend Clarence said, you don't need a pill, you need a purpose. What's your purpose? Not only as a professional, but as a parent, as a human being. I mean, there's plenty of people who have volunteer organizations that they hold close to their heart that they want to get involved in. And then what kind of lifestyle do you want, which you talked about as well. And then how do you put that all together to then really create the how? How is this life going to look for you? Do you want to have a private practice? Do you want to contract out? Do you want to write a book? Do you want to do research? Do you want to go speak? How do you put it all together so that you live a life that really reflects who you are and your own definition of success? To me, that's the Rockstar Doctor life. That's figuring out how do you have it all and how do you get clear on what your all is. And actually, listeners, we're going to definitely drop in links to Jason's book and that's the cool stuff he's got going on. But we also have a program called Create Your Own Rockstar Doctor Life. And it's actually an ebook that takes you through all these steps. So I'll drop in a link to that. And that might help some of you listening. But when I think about all the things you're doing right now, Jason, I still go like, okay, how does he make time for all this stuff? And maybe it's the same, maybe your answer is the same answer that I give when people ask me, how do you do all these things that you're doing? I'm like, I don't know. I just do them, and I'm engaged and I'm happy in every part of my life right now. But if you were to think about how does Dr. J go from Dr. J, the clinical psychologist, the professional speaker, the dad, the ski guy, like, do you have any specific rituals or strategies that really help you sort of shift roles or shift gears, or ways that you manage your life that might help other people?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that has helped me is that I have a thing. And I know that sounds really ridiculous, but I have a thing. And that is, honestly, as a parent, that is probably one of my biggest fears, is that my kids don't find a thing. And by the way, and that can change. I always call surfing as my rebound sport from when I retired from racing, but it was my thing. And I was able to immerse myself in it and geek out over it. And will this board help me do this? And was this one better for turns and cuts and
So when you say your thing, you're talking about your love for racing?
Yeah, my love for racing or riding or surfing. But the thing about the thing is, it really, one, it was my place of refuge, but it was also a place of like crazy engagement, crazy learning, mastery, even with bikes at least. And it gave me enough time away from obligation and responsibility that I was able to approach all that other stuff with a different perspective, a fresh perspective, or just more energy, or more gratitude, or just motivation, because it's like, well, geez, I do want this surfboard. I probably should take on a couple extra clients, or if I want that I do want to go on this like crazy bike trip, and okay, well, so how are we going to make that happen? So that thing keeps me, that purpose keeps me energized to approach all this other stuff. And the other thing too is I guess I do view myself as a high performer, but one thing that I have naturally put into practice, and I wasn't able to articulate it, but I definitely, it's funny, I posted that picture on Instagram with the choices and the donuts. There's like the picture of the donuts.
Oh, that was today. Yeah.
The chips. And but it was, and I really meant it. It's like, if you want the damn donut, eat the donut. Don't eat the donut if you're going to kill yourself and beat yourself up over the donut, right? If you want the fruit, or you actually need it because it's good for you, eat that. But don't kill yourself, right? But don't feel like you're missing out because you didn't have the donut, right? Like there's a win on either side.
It's all perspective, right?
It is perspective, right? And by the way, like I'm 45. It's really important to me to be in shape and be strong. One, to just buck that whole dad bod thing, which I think is like not a good look for us as guys. Although apparently women are more attracted to that now, so whatever. But that's aside. But
I think that's subjective.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that's about. Actually, I do, but that's a whole nother topic.
Whole other conversation, Dr. J.
Talk about that later. But it's important for me to be strong and be active, because I do have kids. I want to do stuff with them, and I get more enjoyment out of my life if I'm capable, right? So, but that said, I eat what I want, and I've learned to shed a certain amount of guilt.
Well, so basically what you're saying is,
my head's not in the clouds on this stuff. Like, there is guilt if, like, my wife's having a bad day and I had the best day of my life. Like, I am somewhat empathetic, but I, like, these are like, it's so funny that the punishment we put ourselves through, whether it's food or money or eating lunch out that's not at your desk. Like, so, and I learned that early on in college because I was actively racing, and I saw these kids just being so hyper competitive about their grades and this and that. And I was already kind of living a professional life and getting paid a salary, and I was already a professional. I was just like, wow, like, you guys are stupid. Like, this is my 20-year-old self talk. It's like, you guys are stupid.
Yeah.
Like, but no one, like, no one's going to care what grade you got.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they might.
That was the case in chiro school, I remember too. I mean, it was sort of like you'd struggle through some of these courses and realize none of my future patients are going to care the grade that I got in biochemistry.
But
right?
check this out. As a doc, do you want the person who you talk to is like, oh, I already know what it is? I mean, don't get me wrong. Or do you want the person who's actually like, you know what? I'm going to find out what it is. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I mean, I guess there's two ways to look at that for sure on both sides, but you want the person who recognizes that they are resourceful and that they have it within them to, or at least humble enough to go find the help or go open the book or whatever it is to figure it out. Mm-hmm. Plus the compounded experience. But anyways, I'm getting all.
So really, like if we were to look at your time management skill, it's really, you're anchored by your purpose, your thing being one, your love of athleticism and the sports, you're surfing, you're mm-hmm. racing, but mm-hmm. also you want to be in shape for your family to be mm-hmm. there for your kids. So I think what you're saying is your purpose. Oh yeah. Time management. Right. So right. It's really what I was getting at was the guilt, right? The guilt. Cause I think that kills us with the time management. I think our thoughts around time management are worse than our actual time management. And I've seen this especially as an athlete where, yeah, there's this training plan, training schedule, and then, oh, you get injured, or, there's a rain delay or rain race and you can't warm up. There's all these things that get in the way of your plan. Not to mention the stuff you do, but the thing is, that's life though.
That's right. And the thing what I teach is you are not competing against people. You are competing with them. And I was, I've been at a world championship final. I've been in the Pan Am Games. I've been at the Olympics working with other athletes. Like, it is competition. But guess what? When you cross the finish line, everyone goes in their own directions. But that was so freeing to me from like a guilt standpoint and a should standpoint and a have to standpoint. That's like, wait, I want my book out, but no one's really waiting for my book unless I kind of said my book will be ready June 1st, but no one's waiting for it. So I can write this when I want or not, and maybe I will stay up one night and just go maniacal and write for 12 hours and that's fine. And maybe I won't. But I know in here that it's getting done. And by the way, I said it's getting done, not it's going to get done or will get done. No, it's getting done. It's like literally getting done. And
so you give yourself more grace and more freedom around what you accomplish when you let yourself
because
evolve.
The other thing about time is we don't know how much we have, but it's very interesting. I use the movie The Matrix as an example because I work with racers who are literally timed. Like, look, you've been on a long distance flight, and it's when you go on those flights overseas, it's almost like, I mean, the world's still happening, but in a weird way, you're kind of stuck in time, right? That 8 hours or 14 hours is kind of an interesting space because you're might be traveling people, but really you're kind of on your own. It's its own space, and then when you hit the ground, it's like boom, then the world starts again. But guess what? Even in your race, whether it's 30 seconds or a minute, within that minute, you have all the time in the world. Within that 30 seconds, you have all that time in the world. Within the 5 minutes, within your 4 years of college, you have all the time in the world, right? So if you can kind of like pull back, and that's a bit getting into like the getting granular about the work I do with people, but that's how we manipulate time. And I even have an exercise where I show an example where I have them kind of run in place. And I'm holding the time for 30 seconds and I'm having them, and I'm like, do as fast as you can. And then what happens is probably around second 15, they're wondering when 30 seconds will be up. And this is with people who are complaining about time. And it's like, well, how much stuff was going through your head in 30 seconds? How long was that 30 seconds? Right? Because of the perception of the effort, the perception and all this stuff, right? Your mind shifted into like, oh my gosh. Now, for 30 seconds, say if we were recording this and on air right now, 30 seconds might not be enough time. But when they were running in place, especially being at some business seminar, not expecting to in a buttoned up shirt. Yeah. 30 seconds was long. Or doing a plank. All of a
Right.
sudden, a minute is long. How come a minute's long here, but not there? Right? You have all the time in the world within that minute. You have all the time. So if you can recognize that, you literally become Neo in the Matrix. You actually get, instead of it's getting to see that person you're fighting, you actually see the code. You actually see the rules behind it. And it's like, oh, okay, I can manipulate time. And something that helps me with that, and something that has helped me with that is I did a couple of experiments. I did one experiment when I did nothing but yoga. So if I rode my bike, I rode my bike. If I surfed, I surfed. But there was no formal weightlifting or other training, just yoga. And the experiment was, how strong would I be afterwards, and how well would I manage myself in a competition format? And lo and behold, I held up pretty well and managed myself pretty well. I did get a bit tired because there wasn't much cardio in the program, but that's okay. And then literally last year did another thing. It's like, okay, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to meditate in the dark. Just like listen to the silence and let whatever runs through my mind run through my mind. And then sure enough, time started to warp again. What I thought was 10 minutes was 40 minutes. And yeah. and so it started to get, I don't want to say it got trippy, but it started to become more and more evident to me in my practice, and then having athletes and people that I work with do these things, that they were recognizing very clearly how much things they were not in control of, and how in control of themselves that they can be. I don't even know if I answered your question, but
that's going to make me think. Yeah, I gotta like process that a little bit.
Right? No, but we spend a lot of time trying to control things.
Yeah.
And in the process of doing that, we're not always controlling ourselves.
Everyone do that with me if you're listening right now. Because I think that's a heavy truth there. So, you're pretty fired up when I hear you talk. And when
I'm on hype. I've been on hype lately.
Okay, but what keeps you, my last question to you, because I love talking to you and I get to talk to you a lot, which is great, but we got to respect everyone's time listening.
Yes, for sure.
But if you were to think, my last question for you is, what keeps you inspired? What keeps you pushing yourself, helping more people? What gives you your inspiration every day?
Every day.
Maybe some days more than others.
Nah, well, I got to tell you, definitely the last year, and I knew it was coming. As a kid, I articulated it as, there's some things I need to fix. But what that's translated to now lately, and especially after my father's passing, and just kind of where I am as my own man, is I owe. I owe. And I'm not approaching it from like a fear standpoint or a scarcity standpoint. It's really the opposite. It's like, if I look at my life and the things that make me cry, it's rarely, it might be something sad, but it's not because my heart's broken. It's because my heart's full. Right. And it's the overwhelm of that I'm like, it's too much for me. And so from that standpoint, it's like, whoa, for whatever reason, Jay, like outside, and you might have learned a lot of stuff, but I still, I don't know why exactly, but for whatever reason, as a kid, I processed whatever I processed. I experienced whatever I experienced. It led to, I've done and was able to do most of the things, or pretty much everything I really set out to do. And by the way, family, wife, kids, like everyone helped me do that a great deal. And a lot of it I asked for sure. Hey, honey, 3 more years of school. Hey, I'm going to race a little bit longer. Yeah, I know I broke my femur, but I want to go back out there. There's a lot of asks. I'm getting a new car, whatever it is. I owe. And I think, and that's what motivates me.
Like you owe it.
Like I owe
your
them.
gifts.
I owe them. I owe, there's no more asks in me. I don't even want to like ask like the world, but I'm not going to ask. There's no more asks in me that I owe. Right. So now it's like, okay, how can I help other people realize their potential? Right. That's me paying, even though it's a business relationship, like I still owe. Right. And then, by the way, when you do pay me, like I owe you
Right.
that result you want. I owe my family my attention, or forget my attention, me not being a grumpy dad,
Mm-hmm.
right? Me being
So
a
you feel
happy.
a sense of personal obligation
Yeah, like
because of the life that you've been given?
I totally am taking this personal. And
Mm-hmm.
candidly, I've had some wins. I've taken some licks, but I've come
Mm-hmm.
out on the other side, and I got some wins. And one of the biggest things for me is that I'm so ready. Like,
So it's a sense of personal responsibility based on
that's
your
it.
successes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like
I'm
your
so ready
responsibility to
for
share your
everything.
gifts with others because your life has been blessed and you've had people there for you and overcome injuries and challenges with racing, with personal stuff.
Yeah.
And it's that sense of that sense of responsibility to humanity is what
Yeah.
fires you up all the time.
And I really believe, like, I know what's going on in the world. I'm pretty informed, but I really believe, especially in the United States, with politics and this side versus that side and this people and that people, it just gets so
Mm.
negative. But if I actually look around, it's like, there's also a lot of great things that are not talked about, right? So it's also my responsibility to be a great thing and help other people experience great things, or be great people, and have them talk about it, or me talk about it, or whatever, right? Like, I think, you think global, act local, but I guess that's my way of acting local, which is like, if I can make my world as pretty as possible and help other people make their respective worlds as pretty as possible, then I truly believe that that's how you affect change. Yeah, people will bump into each other along the way and have disagreements, and that's fine, but that's where we start talking about the radical honesty, and that's where we start talking about acceptance, and that's where we start talking about grace, and learning how to mix those ingredients for ourselves so that we can make a nice mix.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of great information here for your listeners. I hope that you've taken some time to settle in and hear some of the things that Dr. J. Rich has to say. Obviously, if you want to connect with him even further, we're going to include in the show notes all the possible ways to get in touch with him, on Facebook, on his website, on Instagram, get his book, follow him and see the programs he'll have coming up. Thank you so much for your time, Jay. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. Find out more about today's guests and everything else that we talked about in the show notes. You can also find all this content and so much more, including videos, blog posts, and how you can work with me on the Rockstar Doctor Life website. If you haven't yet reviewed the show, we'd love it if you headed on over to iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review about what your thoughts are about future episodes for the show and what you like best. Feel free to connect with me on Instagram at Melissa Longo DC and of course on Facebook. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.